Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. With the transfer portal window largely winding down, taking a look back at the last couple of months and, giving some transfer portal grades out. And next up on the docket, Jonathan Smith, this Michigan State program where I think it's really easy for a lot of national talking heads to get on and just say Michigan State got decimated in the transfer portal. And I'm not necessarily going to argue that they didn't lose some really good players. They certainly did. But on the flip side of it, this situation for Michigan State was drastically different than a lot of other programs over the last couple of months. So you have to talk about this program in a little bit of a different way. I want to get into, a few things that I think Michigan State did a really nice job of with the transfer portal. Obviously, highlight some concerns we have heading into 2024, give you guys my grades. I think a lot of the Michigan State fans know that Jonathan Smith, in my mind, was an absolute home run hire. And for the Michigan State fans who've been listening the last couple of weeks and months, I am fired up about where this program can go over the next 3 to 4 years. And although you might not get a 9-win season in 2024, there's no doubt in my mind that Jonathan Smith is going to build this program the right way. You can't really say that from the previous coach and head coach, Mel Tucker. So I'm really excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Michigan State fans. It's been a blast talking this program over the last couple of months. I can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear some feedback from you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into it. I want to start with the positives. And I think one of the kind of overlooked positives and really one of the overlooked narratives regarding the transfer portal is how you can build your roster for multiple years using the transfer portal. And I think Jonathan Smith got right to work doing that. And I think the transfer portal is largely considered like a one-year rental. You get guys for 1 year, they go to the NFL draft, maybe they transfer out. You look at some of the names that Jonathan Smith brought in. He is building this program for the future, right? And I think it starts with quarterback Aiden Childs. And I think you can just give Michigan State a solid grade right off the bat because they brought in one of the most talented young quarterbacks in the country. And we all know how important quarterback play is to a team winning football games. Michigan State knows that firsthand from 2023. I've loved Aiden Childs since he's been a high school kid. And I think more importantly, the relationship between Aiden Childs and Jonathan Smith is so strong. And Jonathan Smith is a proven developer of young quarterbacks. He is consistently getting the most out of quarterbacks. Just look at what he did with DJU during last year at Oregon State. Look what he's done at Washington or Boise State. This is one of the better coaches in the country in terms of developing quarterbacks. And he's got one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country in Aiden Childs, who, from an athletic profile standpoint, checks so many boxes. I think Michigan State fans are probably sitting there and saying, Aiden Childs might be the most talented quarterback we've had in a very long time. And then you pair him up with a coach that knows how to develop quarterbacks. The future of Michigan State, I think, is bright purely because you have a guy like Aiden Childs coming into this program that has 3 years of eligibility remaining. Then you take a look at Andrew Dennis, a guy that is going to be a true freshman, probably not going to start for Michigan State, but you're kind of getting the feel that Jonathan Smith knows how he wants this roster, knows how he wants this program to look. And that is with an emphasis along the lines of scrimmage. And although we have some question marks about the line of scrimmage play heading into 2024, I'm sitting here and saying in 2025 and 2026 and 2027, when Jonathan Smith has, a couple more recruiting cycles and transfer portal cycles, this is going to be a strength of this Michigan State program. You look back to his time at Oregon State. Why were they winning so many games in such a hard place to win at Oregon State? It's because they dominated teams up front along the line of scrimmage. Why are you so optimistic that Jonathan Smith can come to Michigan State and get this train back on the tracks? The Big Ten is a line of scrimmage league, and Jonathan Smith knows how to create good lines of scrimmages. I think the first overarching take that I really like is he brought in a lot of youth in the portal that is not just going to help this team win games in 2024, but it's going to help these teams win games in 2025 and in 2026 as well. I think secondly, the linebacker room. I look at this Michigan State linebacker room and say it's one of the better groups in the Big Ten. And for as many question marks as we have around this defensive line, you kind of hope that this linebacker room can maybe cover up for some of those question marks. I mean, you bring in a guy in Wayne Matthews from Old Dominion, 135 tackles, 31 run stops last year, was one of the better linebackers, not only at the group of five level, but in the country. Then you go bring Jordan Turner in from Wisconsin, absolute stud, has played a ton of football for Wisconsin. Jordan Hall is one of the better young linebackers you see in the country. Cal Halliday has been a staple in that Michigan State defense. We just list four linebackers that, I mean, y'all feel good about starting, and you can do a lot of different things with those linebackers. So, yes, you have question marks on the defensive line. Our team's going to be able to run the football on them. That's a question we'll figure out in the fall. You feel pretty good about where this linebacker room is heading into 2024. And I think thirdly, I should say, the secondary. I mean, it starts with the guy in Ed Woods coming from Arizona State. What Michigan State goes toe-to-toe with Alabama and beats Alabama out for a guy like Ed Woods, who's played some really good football at Arizona State, where, I mean, let's just put it frankly, I'm a Big Ten guy too. Many of you guys know I'm actually a Michigan fan. You're not going to see the passing attacks that you saw in the Pac-12, that Ed Woods saw in the Pac-12. I think Ed Woods can come in and be a really good cornerback for this Michigan State team. You add LeJon Cavazos. I think that's how you say the name, from UNC, who I know North Carolina fans were really high on heading into 2024. You sprinkle in some really talented safeties like Malik Spencer, Dylan Tatum in the back end, and I say, all right, we have question marks about the defensive line. That's probably all we have question marks about. Maybe some depth concerns in the back end, but I look at the linebacker room and in the secondary and say, this unit is pretty damn good. And we kind of all know that one of the big struggles that Mel Tucker had at Michigan State was a secondary that was poorly coached. I think they bring in a phenomenal defensive backs coach from Oregon. I'm a really big fan of what Michigan State has in the back end. Now, getting to the questions, what Michigan State did not do very well. And again, it's very hard to hold this against Jonathan Smith. He tried his hardest to hold on to some of these guys in the winter portal window. He ended up doing so. Then they leave in the spring. You lose guys like Simeon Barrow Jr. You lose guys like Derek Harmon. I don't think they brought in difference makers on the defensive line. A little bit concerned about that. And I think that's where a lot of Michigan State fans are concerned. Now, I think those questions hopefully are mitigated by kind of the back end of the defense, but that's one of those things that if you're Michigan State and you're saying, hey, we want to go win 6-7 games, it's probably how that young defensive line comes together that's going to really say that. And then you look at the offensive line and say, you lose some guys like Spencer Brown and Ethan Boyd, no guys that were, all conference players for Michigan State, that quite frankly, that offensive line wasn't very good to begin with in 2023. I think losing some of those names is not necessarily as bad as you might say. You bring in a guy like Tanner Miller, who was extremely good for Oregon State, kind of fits exactly what Oregon State wanted to do on offense. And you think he's going to fit exactly what Michigan State wants to do on offense with Jonathan Smith coming over. I think I have more question marks about the depth on the offensive line than I do the starting five. I have a best friend who's a Michigan State fan. We were talking about, and he says, hey, I feel good about the starting five. If we have to go 6, 7, 8, those are where the question marks start coming in. So this Michigan State offensive line can stay healthy. I think you feel pretty good about it, or decent about it, but you do have some question marks about the depth. And then lastly, the wide receiver position. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised about the wide receivers and how the wide receivers played during the spring game. I think Nick Marsh, as a true freshman, is probably going to be a very, very good football player for Michigan State immediately. That being said, I wish they brought in some difference makers at the wide receiver spot. I know they tried to make a run at a few wide receivers, weren't able to get that done. This is a Michigan State offense that wants to run the football and then push the ball down the field and play action. You have some question marks about the wide receiver spot, but if Nick Marsh can kind of do what you saw him do in the spring game, and make no mistake about it, from a physical trait standpoint, Nick Marsh is ready to play year one. I think the question is, between the ears, is he ready to play? If he's ready to play, you have a little less question marks about that wide receiver spot. I look at this Michigan State team and say, yes, you have some question marks, but I think there's some things to be, kind of excited about heading into 2024. We'll see how it plays out. Giving my grade for Michigan State, I'm going to give them a B-. And I just because they lost so many good players through the portal that they couldn't hang on to. I think they brought in some really good players. I think they brought in some really young players. And, maybe you have to grade Jonathan Smith on a little bit of a scale in terms of, hey, maybe he scored a 65 on the test, but you're going to round that up to a solid B. So B minus is probably what I'm giving Michigan State. But again, I think a lot of Michigan State fans kind of shared the sentiment where Jonathan Smith kind of took over a dumpster fire. Now, Mel Tucker did not leave this program in a very good place. The development certainly wasn't there. A lot of players leave through the portal. I'm optimistic about more the future of Jonathan Smith in this Michigan State program than I am in 2024, but I think this team can be pretty damn tough in the Big Ten in 2024. Fired up about this program, not only in 2024, but in the future. We'll cut it at that. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.